Well, I appreciate you all joining CCVR and joining tonight's second orientation call. Hopefully we won't have any, technical issues will be at a minimal. And I put together a few slides just to go over some kind of highlight some things about navigating the course, some screenshots. You may have other questions as well. I encourage you to ask those in chat. And then I'll open up the floor at the end to address any other questions you may have had. If you weren't on last week's original orientation call or hadn't had a chance to see the recording, I was joined by Molly Rundquist, who will be adjunct faculty through this CCVR course and doing some mentorship as well, helping out with assignments and contributing to the kind of clinical reasoning, as well as some content particularly related to some cervical issues and concussion, because we're updating some of that. If you didn't get to see it, we also had Fred Stute and Dave Bender on the call. Tonight, you're just kind of stuck with me. Both Fred and Dave are faculty of Impact, not the cognitive test, but the fellowship and certification in manual therapy program, who also contribute to the course content. So tonight it's just going to be me, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to move some windows around. I normally have multiple screens going, but tonight I'm just single screening it. And give you a fair warning, you might hear a dog in the background. So this is screenshots of the CCVR hub, and within 360 NeuroGo on the left-hand side, you'll see CCVR Course 2.0 dashboard. So I took some screenshots of the hub. It has some quite a bit of welcome introduction content in that space. And then when you scroll down, you'll see these links to the syllabus, the guided lesson plan. And the guided lesson plan is basically associated with dates. The syllabus does some further explanation of grading, which now that I think about it, that's something I didn't include a screenshot of, but we can certainly talk about. From here, you can also go to links to course content, the coaching call registration links, the coaching call recordings. I will be making announcements when they're uploaded. You can go to the discussion board, which is part of the assignment, and also the chat. And you can see here that you can also go to here, which takes you over to say hello, which many of you have done. And thank you so much for that. And introduce yourself. So on the next one, you'll see on the left-hand side, I have CCVR Hub. I also have highlighted lessons. So from this link, you can, if you click on this, it will take you to the lessons. This is Unit 1. What I want to emphasize again here is that when you see these first titles, and over on the right-hand side, it tells you how long the video is. Like Anatomy and Physiology of the Vestibular System, this is kick it off with Craig Kemper. He's a neurosurgeon who talks about central A&P. And then I follow with what I call practical application, kind of functional application to A&P Part 1 and Part 2. And then I have another shorter video that provides just some transition from knowledge-based A&P, and it actually had a couple updates in there. So this is, like Dr. Kemper, he was part of one of the original speakers when we launched the CCVR course for the first time. I also did kind of functional or practical A&P. But below, you'll also see Unit 1, Key Concepts. And this is something that's newer. in the last year and a half, where what I did is I went back and took content from Dr. Kemper's, content from mine, and anything kind of newer or maybe a concept that I thought, people were struggling with, and I add it into key concepts. So key concepts is highlighting the previous speakers. So some of you may want to go and watch all of these videos. Some of you may want to start with key concepts. And if you hear me reference a speaker, then, and you don't feel like you have a full understanding of it, you can go back and watch that talk. Each to his own. We all learn and do differently. We learn differently. So it's really what works best for you. I've had some people who want to watch all the videos and then get the key concepts. I've had people with more, who want to go with key concepts and kind of fill in the blanks. So you can, whatever suits you and how is, best for you to not only understand, but really kind of apply. And, A&P is one of those things I'm going to just historically, I'll relate to myself, is I've always loved A&P, but I have to admit that I've not always completely understood why we take such a deep dive into A&P. And it wasn't until I ended up teaching in the local PT program when I covered A&P that I really began to realize the importance of it. And, not just through regurgitating and memorizing, but the functional application. And that's why I went and titled these practical application, or I'll sometimes, say functional A&P. So how do we take these, kind of complex concepts in A&P and be able to apply them clinically? And because I'm biased in the vestibular world, that's applies to so many other areas, but I just think that dizziness remains so misunderstood that if you choose to be in this space, you're not going to always get that accurate diagnosis. I may see a patient tomorrow that I'm, asking staff about, just backtracking, I saw this, where I end up going is taking an exam, imaging was normal, the V&G was normal, we've got, VIMPs were abnormal, and, what bedside test, and then I'm going it back and I'm applying A&P. And I'm just a big believer that before we can really understand pathology, we need to understand normal physiology. And this becomes, you'll hear this reoccurring theme. You'll hear us when we get to talk about ocular tilt reaction. And, there's a physiological OTR, and then there's a pathological OTR. So there's normal physiological diplopia, and then there's pathological diplopia. So that's why we do just so much constant review of A&P, because much of the diagnostic testing or imaging is just not sensitive to vestibular disorders. So we have to know the A&P of both the peripheral and the neurological systems to often, if we're not making that medical diagnosis, at least getting them to the person who can manage that. This is really one of the areas that I repeatedly think the more I know, the less I know, is in differential diagnosis related to complex cases where we rely heavily on A&P. So then if we move through the CCVR lessons, again, what I want to highlight here, I just mentioned it, but I'll do a little kind of box around this, is a closer look at these lessons, is these top part, when you see these titles, those are the original faculty members, their recordings. And then there's the key concepts where I highlight bits and pieces of information that I think are the most clinically applicable and to best prepare you for the final exam. All right, so the discussion board, this is where we have one of your assignments. And so again, you'll see discussion board highlighted on the left. So you click on it. When you click on that, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the discussion board assignments. I started with kind of what superpowers do you have? And I think I really love reading the responses. And so each Sunday by midnight, you will see, and it probably will happen before then, a new discussion post. So each week is the new lesson plan. And not lesson plan with the assignments associated with it. So if we take a closer look, virtually impossible to kind of read this, but when you click on what superpowers do I have, I post something and then you go comment and you can put your comments underneath there. And that's how you answer the questions from the assignment. I mentioned this last week. I really appreciate in the beginning phases where I see people are really, staying on top, gung-ho, having long responses. You can do as long responses as you want throughout the course. But then we see that kind of get more difficult and more difficult. This isn't about looking at the right answer. This is about, and there will not be a right answer, but maybe there's best answers, but just really looking at how do you think, what questions come to mind when someone, you see a brief case study. What are the 3 top questions that come to your mind? What are the 3 tests you think you want to do? You may change your mind, after reading it later. I love to look at this because we, a physical or physiotherapist will think differently than an occupational therapist, that will think differently from a physician, from an audiologist, from a neuro-optometrist. And so I love to look at the different responses that we get on, what do I think the best tests are? What do I think the most likely diagnosis are? These questions will vary, but you will see this pattern of a very brief case study and what kind of information, what's kind of our next step. So that's really the point of that, is to utilize that clinical reasoning. I do highlight actually on a later slide, but when you do the post, I like you to make a reference, at least one reference. You don't have to reference every single thing, obviously, but one reference to maybe something in the lecture or an article that you like. And then for each assignment, just a minimum of one reference. You don't have to reference every single response that you have. Okay. On announcements. See, I've already made an announcement. This was a welcome and CCVR Insights. I will make announcements when I update coaching calls. I will make an announcement of something, hey, this was something that changed, or a new article that came out, something that I think is relevant. That's where I'll make some CCVR announcements. So on this one, you're not going to be able to read this whole thing, but I went here and I just did some kind of CCVR insights. And, it's not required to a minimum, there's no minimum grade requirement on the quizzes. It's just that you complete them. You can take them as many times as you want. And the quiz questions are kind of those, knowledge regurgitation questions, not as heavy in the clinical application, but taking the quizzes will help you on the final exam, because the final exam is a mixture of knowledge-based questions and clinical application, like through case study And so they'll help prepare you for that. Again, no minimum requirement. It's just that you complete them, and you can take them as many times as you like. The key concepts, again, that's where I highlight. It is required that you do 2 assignments. I'm going to highlight that again on one of the final slides. So when I say assignments, there's 2 posts to each assignment, and it's in the discussion board, and I'll review about what's on your mind. So in this, when you open this kind of post up, you'll see some things I've highlighted that could potentially be helpful throughout the CCVR course. And one of those requirements is to have fun, right? We want to have some fun with this. CCVR chat. This is where you can ask questions to the group, to me. You'll see, Jessica had put a little note in here that we're moving this to tonight's call to a Zoom link versus we had originally had it on Webinar Jam. So you can put things in chat. If you don't want to ask your questions to the group, you can direct message me or direct message Molly. And you can talk to each other, and those are private messages. I don't have access to your personal direct messages. So we've gone through the hub, you can go right to the lesson plans, the discussion board, where I'll make announcements, where you can ask questions, share ideas. And then there's this, whole list of all the units, and the units are lesson plans. What you'll notice here is you have access to, when you click on this, it will take you to the handout, and then at the bottom it says click here to access the video. And you can move through each one of these. You'll see everything in the lesson plan that you see right here, 1 through 6, but what you won't see is 7. And they won't always be 7, but it's that last supporting materials. Supporting materials is not required. This is where people say, hey, I love that image. I wish you would make a bigger one. Can you make it bigger? So I've put some larger images of the anatomy and physiology. I put articles in there. I made a little video on Ewald's Law in there. Someone was like, I'm just trying to grasp Ewald's Law. And I was like, well, let's just look at this kind of more in a more laid back way. And I will let you know what's in there. On the coaching calls each week, I'll just do a little reminder, like want you to know in supporting materials. So like in BPPV, the supporting materials are quick guides. On next week's supporting materials on nystagmus, I have a quick reference on types of nystagmus associated. It's basically a quick guide associated with pathological nystagmus with acute vertigo. Very different than BPPV. And so I'll let you know what's in the supporting materials, but meaning I won't ask any exam question won't come from supporting materials. Any exam question or a quiz question will come from your primary content. And all of that's covered in at a minimal of key in the key concepts. So here's a little bit on the review of the assignments. You have the discussion board. Each week you'll answer questions. You'll provide at least one reference, an article, or a reference to a lesson plan like a speaker. The second is in What's on Your Mind. And What's on Your Mind is up above the CCVR course in the NeuroGo member hub. And this when you post here, so each week you'll post in there, it does not have to be on the topic of that lesson plan. It can be a clinical question that you have. It can be an article that you want to share. It could be, hey, our clinic is thinking about buying some equipment. Is there anybody out there using this? Or, I was inspired to go out and buy Blaze pods. And for the clinic, it was on, I guess what is the Black Friday that they have here in the US over Thanksgiving holiday, where they were having a big sale. And someone's like, oh my God, I use them in the clinic all the time. This is how I use them. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to have to buy these. And we love them. So I don't want this to be a stressful thing. It's really taking opportunity of asking colleagues from around the world a question you may have, sharing an experience. Like, I tried this, believe me, we all have shared questions. Could be an article asking about a certain treatment. If one thing I didn't mention is at the very top of your screen of 360 NeuroGo is a search, a window to search. So someone may have questions on MDDS, like who's treating MDDS? Are you using the DIE protocol? And if you type that in, it'll show you all the posts that have come up regarding that topic. So just again, don't want people to be stressed. What I really don't want this space, to be utilized for, it's certainly okay to say, hey, I'm in the CCVR course and I came across this and it made me think about that. But this isn't the space where you would ask a specific question, like, hey, I'm in lesson 2 and I have a question on this quiz question. That's where you go to chat, or that's where you direct message me or Molly about those questions, because in what's on your mind, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of members in that space and many haven't taken the CCVR course, so they won't really know how to relate to the question. I've had people reach out to me like, I just can't think of anything. I don't know. I'm, struggling. Sometimes we're just kind of short on space to think of anything. Just reach out to me, because I'll say, well, you know what? Do you have any interest in this? Or this is a question I had this week. Usually if I do have a question, I'm also posting in there to try to get feedback from others. So you can always ask for a little help if you can't seem to think of what to post in what's on your mind. Just some miscellaneous. I'm going to get some windows out of the way here because so I can see the screen a little bit better. And I don't see any questions coming on in chat. So if you're thinking of something, you can start typing them in. Don't forget, when you watch a video, right below it'll say incomplete, and it'll say complete lesson. So you want to click on that. So that it shows that you've completed, once you've gotten through it, complete the lesson. That'll be an option. It will take you on to the next lesson. Obviously you don't have to complete it at that time, but don't forget about that bottom button below the video. Again, no minimum requirement on the quizzes, just take them. They were made to prepare you for knowledge-based questions on the final exam. I love clinical application. These are really more kind of knowledge-based. Completion of assignments are required before you can take the final lab. Remember, like week 6, you do get a break to try to catch up. And don't hesitate to reach out. Life happens, and I get that. So if you feel like you're falling behind, the last thing I want is someone going through this course content in any kind of panic mode, or, there'll be moments probably of stress because it's a little content heavy. But just reach out. We really want a community here that you feel supported. The in-person lab is May 4th in Austin, Texas. Can be done virtually. We start virtual labs after the in-person lab. So within the next 30 days, I create a calendar that has a bunch of different times you can sign up. It's 1 hour that you have to complete the virtual lab. Sometimes it takes a little time to get used to the navigation, so I encourage you to get in there and play around. One of the things that if you haven't been in there, you'll notice, let's say I'm in a discussion board assignment and I go back, it can take you to the top of the menu bar and you have to scroll back down to find yourself sometimes. So back where you might want to navigate in the CCVR 2.0. If you're writing a message in chat, this is no biggie, but I find that a lot of this happens to a lot of people. If you've never had to type a message, and like if you don't use Teams, something like Teams in your organization, that's kind of the same thing. But if you say, hey, and then you push enter because you want to start a new line, it sends it. No, that's okay. You can just say, hey, you can go back up and edit it. But if you want to have a return, you have to hit the shift and the enter key to make a new line. So no worries, just this little something. You can download the Circle app on an iPhone or an Android. I personally, I don't know if you can see it. I have it set up as a browser. I like to access 360 NeuroGo as a browser versus being in the app. That's just me personally. And so what I can do is in announcements after tonight, I'll put, let's see what I'll do it. Yeah, I'll probably just put it in announcements and then just say, give you a link that gives you instructions. It's pretty easy how you can make a shortcut on your phone. And that when I use that shortcut, that's a browser, it's like I'm on my desktop. And I like what I see, but you may like the Circle app better. And I've got a question here from Jake. And so, all right, is there a website or suggested links on current literature or any topics related to dizziness and vestibular? Sure. I do share those, and that I will say, I'm going to type in dizziness and balance.com. This is Dr. Timothy Hain. It's, the organization in Chicago. That is their website. It is written for healthcare providers. It is not written for patients. I know patients probably find it, but he basically shares everything they do in their practice, medical management. It's complex topics. We use Dr. Haynes' website as a reference, even if I'm looking, maybe has he updated any journal articles? We use it a lot. So that would be a site. I know that Vestibular First, they sell video goggles, and they sell that's one thing I'll be showing you is like models of the ear. You can either take that to a 3D printer yourself, or you can buy them from them. There's also I think it's iPhone only. iPhone only is if you type in AVOR, this is a free app on your phone that you can utilize to look at different types of pathological nystagmus, BPPV, central, peripheral. It shows you the pictures of the canals. That's kind of a really cool app. You can use it on your iPhone or an iPad. So, I try to consistently give you resources. There's certainly, patient-centered resources like the Vestibular Disorders Association. I'm trying to think of the name of the one in Canada. It's dizziness, and I can definitely find those for you. There is a physiotherapist organization in Europe that's a great resource. There's the American Physical Therapy Association that has the vestibular SIG. So looks like it, those are all mentioned throughout the course. And then Brandon, did last week's coaching call cover the same info as tonight? I spent a little bit more time tonight just yes, I'm going to say yes, but we heard from Molly and kind of her background on how she was vestibular when then going through a manuals therapy certification fellowship program. We heard from Dave talking about just the importance of clinical reasoning. And then Fred talked about that. And then Dave, who also is contributing faculty on this launch to provide some new content. He gives a little bit of background on him coming in as a manual therapist into CCVR and how he, managed all that new content. But tonight I really wanted to focus on, do you feel comfortable navigating the platform as lesson 1 is released this week? So next Tuesday night will be a coaching call, this week's lesson. So send me questions you have and I'll address them. So we will start next week's coaching call with, I'll highlight, what's in supporting materials. We'll go over the week's assignment, and I just randomly choose different answers. And then we open up the floor, and I make sure, if once I have those questions ahead of time, I put them in slides and I go through and answer them. And then we just open up the floor. And I also like to utilize this time for clinical application. So on some of those slides, I may highlight something that I think is super, super important. And then I see, can you view things better on the iPhone in the browser? What can you not view on the iPhone? That's a great question because I don't use the app anymore. I just like the browser. So I can, I would need to do a little, I'd like to do a little investigation, but I can look into that. I actually don't know the answer because it's been so long since I've used the app that I'm more familiar with what's in the browser is just what you see on your desktop. Can you remind me what the best way to send you a private message? And so, you can just direct message me within the platform. So I'm trying to think if I shared my screen, I'm not even sure I have 360 Go open. So let me see something. Let me share my screen for a second. Again, no biggie. We'll go to, and now you should see me within 360 NeuroGo. If you look up on the right-hand side, you can direct message anyone right there. So you can direct message. I won't open it up because it'll have people who have direct messaged me, but you can click on there and just type in Bridget, and that sends me a direct message, and then we can start our own thread. So right there at the top hand part of the screen, and hopefully that helps. Sometimes people accidentally delete themselves out of a lesson. They're like, oh my gosh, I went and it's not there. And I can go in and see on the back end where they've accidentally, there's sometimes you'll see where it says leave this space, and leave this space means you're blocking yourself out of this space. And it's okay. You didn't lose anything. I just add you back, and there it is. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to me on that one. Anything else? And just another really random thought is, when you go to CCVR and you may see like 562 members in a space, there's not 562 members in this course. Those are different people from different launches that stay in the space because you have continued access and to the course, and some people come back and watch coaching calls again. So you can always continue to participate in that. So that's why you'll see like a large membership in CCVR, but not that many people are taking it. A little over 50 of you in this course right now. All right. You can type in any other questions you might have, or you can unmute yourself, turn your video on, whatever you want to do. I'll give it a few more seconds here. And don't hear from anyone. I hope you all have, I would say, well, a good evening here, but it may be you may be in a different time zone. But again, I appreciate it. Let me make sure I'm not missing any questions. I don't think so.
Hey, Bridget,
Yeah.
could you tell me, you said the final exam, what is that you said a 1 day thing, or you could do it virtually,
No,
or?
so the lab is in person. And so what we do, we'll have an in-person lab here and people can register for it in person. And Just depends on the size. You know, we've had, well, pre-COVID, when we
Mhm.
only did live labs, you know, we'd have 75 people in a lab and we used a really big space. Sometimes there's, you know, if there's less than 30 in the live lab, then we usually just have it at the clinic. And we go through all the different lab practicals together.
Okay.
And then the written exam, once you take the lab, the written exam is online secure exam that you
Okay.
can do whenever you're ready.
Okay. You could do either or though, the virtual or
You can do, and for the labs, you can do virtual
okay.
or in person.
Gotcha. And that's
Mhm.
you said May 4th in Austin?
So the in person is May 4th. And then after we do the in person lab, we start doing virtual labs.
Okay.
And so we create a calendar, people sign up for it. Everyone will have a handout on the lab competencies, what everyone's expected to know. And so you get a handout on that, you get how many points it's worth. It breaks it down by section. And then on the virtual ones, virtual is pretty fast. You know, it's like, okay, I want you to show me a smooth pursuit test, and I may ask you a clinical application question about it. You know, what if you saw this saccadic intrusions throughout? What does that, you know, does that mean anything to you? And so we just go through like that. In the in-person, we practice and then we just check off.
Okay.
Practice and check off.
Okay.
The virtual is just skill after skill after skill after skill.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
But everyone will know what's they're expected to be tested on with that from a handout. You're just not allowed to use the handout during your checkoff.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. And hopefully, Brandon, that answers your question about the virtual app. I would love as many people as possible to do it live. It's fun. And you know, it's a great time to come to Austin. Okay, thank you, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your financial commitment, your brain bandwidth commitment, your time commitment. And you know, this course is for you. So hopefully can be a part of, we're all part of making it, you know, the best for you. Y'all take care, and I'll make sure this lesson is available. And hey, we'll see you next week.